This is House Planning Help episode 305. Hello, I'm Ben Adam Smith, and this is the podcast for you if you're interested in self-build, because I'm exploring what houses we should be building in the 21st century and trying to break down the major roadblocks that may get in our way. Coming up in this session, my guest is self-builder Mick Woolley, and we're going to be looking at his award-winning project, Larch Corner. And this was actually an award winner at the UK Passivhaus Awards. And once again, if you're someone who's been with me for a while, you might know that my production company, Regen Media, we got to produce the video inserts for the online awards this year that seemed to work really well. Having visited all of the different projects and done that previously when we filmed all the last ones, what's clear is, firstly, it's scaling up. The large projects category, for example, I went to Agar Grove, which is going to be, or could well be, nearing 500 units as we speak, which is impressive to think. For some time, you start with 2 projects and then you get 6 projects and then 20, and it goes up like that. So just to have one scheme, and Camden Council as well embracing this and seeing the sense, it's so exciting. Then at Cambridge University, King's College have built a load of passive houses, and not only that, but they're saying that the rest of the colleges have had a look and thought, oh, actually, this is quite a good idea, isn't it? I can see why you go down this route. So some clear messages here. The one at King's College as well was a CLT project, so low embodied carbon as well, all thought through. So exciting there. Anyway, we're all about building houses, so we're going to stick to some of the self-build projects, and I thought I'd feature 2 of those in the next couple of podcasts. So for this one, it's Larch Corner, which was the small projects winner. Mick Woolley is my guest, and there can be lots of reasons why people build houses, but the trigger for Mick starts with a bit of a sad story.
I'd been working away for years and years, and then I decided I got fed up with working away, so I started working more locally and at least getting home every day. What happened then was one day my wife collapsed at home, and she managed to ring for an ambulance and got her into hospital, and we then discovered that she got a brain tumour. So I packed to work that day and looked after her. That was 3 months only. It was very late to discover that it was, you couldn't do anything. So after that, I'd been interested in building and reading about things for a long while. And I thought, well, what could possibly go wrong? So I decided I'd look for a plot and build.
Now, where did you start looking?
Well, I started in the south of England because I lived in the Peak District and both my boys lived in Surrey, and I wanted to see if I could find somewhere down there. What happened in the end with that was that I was stood in a lovely field which was surrounded by Lamberhurst Vineyard with a bungalow behind me, looking at this site which was really nice, and it was 35 miles from where my sons lived, but it had just taken me an hour and a half to get there because going cross country in the southeast is awful, basically. And also I was looking at the price and thinking, this is ridiculous. It's 450 grand to start. I've got to knock down a building before I can even get going, and I can't actually afford this. And so I decided to stop trying to do a build in the south east and started looking elsewhere.
Now, that is one of the top things that if I'm recommending to people for finding land is flexibility. And You've just demonstrated it there. So did you almost do a radius of how far you can travel in an hour and a half or whatever it might be?
It was more, I looked in Britain. So I went and looked at sites in North Wales. I went and looked at a couple of sites in Cornwall. One fantastic site that was in Looe, but ridiculously steep hill. And
I've just come back from holiday from there.
Oh, yes.
In Cornwall.
It's gorgeous. It's gorgeous down there. But it's very, as you know, Looe, once you get out the village, it's very, very steep.
Driving round there,
and the road was too narrow to get my car up. So I started to think, well, that's a bit crazy. Lovely plot, fantastic plot, but impossible. And I just thought, well, as I get crustier, that is not going to be the place to live. And I looked at another place out near Bodmin Moor, but pretty remote, really. And then this popped up on Rightmove.
How did you know that it was the right community? Because it's quite difficult. When you're coming in cold, it's great to be flexible, but how do you know this is a good area?
Oh, that's a great question. I mean, I think my initial reaction about the place was just that it was a nice spot at the northern tip of the Cotswolds. I'm 2 miles from a great National Trust garden. I looked around to see what other facilities were around. Stratford's not far away, of course. So I thought, well, there's going to be lots that I can go and do around here. So I was looking at that side of it. Knowing that it's a small village, I thought, well, okay, initially I'll be the outsider and maybe in 20 years' time I shall get the inside track. But actually, since I've been here, people are very friendly and it's lovely. It's very nice indeed.
Did the site come with consent to build?
Yes. So I bought it at auction, and the way it was framed was that it was a single-storey passive house build, and I was looking at getting it at what I thought might be quite a bit over the asking price in the auction. And luckily, it petered out at the guide price.
When you buy at auction, I've always heard that there's normally something wrong or something you've got to be careful about. So how did you assess it?
Yes, well, I think one of the reasons that perhaps other people were not interested, although I thought it was great, was because it was a single-storey house that had a design of sorts that was supposedly a passive house, but the house was all timber and the house had a flat roof. Now, that would not suit a lot of people. But actually, I just thought, whoa, this looks nice.
So it sounds like you weren't happy with that design to just go straight ahead and build that. So where did you go from here?
I looked at this and I did think, even at the time that I looked at the plans, that it was a bit dodgy in some respects as a passive house. The structure, the shape was very wriggly and very unusual. And it had a lot more corners in it than I've ended up with, even though it's not a square box. But I wanted to make sure that I did a proper job, and I'd come across Mark reading about Passive House. So that
Mark Siddle we're talking about.
Yes, that's right, yes. And so I contacted him, and he very kindly decided that he would take it on. And the first thing we did was knock out some of the corners. We also had to raise the roof a little, because there literally wasn't enough headroom for insulation in there, which is a bit crazy, but
one important factor.
It is quite an important factor indeed.
What did you want from this house then?
I was quite keen to do a passive house. I was quite keen to make it as low energy as possible, make it comfortable for myself. I've got a brother whose wife is in a wheelchair, so I wanted to make sure that it was accessible so they could visit. And of course I thought, well, who knows, I might end up very crusty and not able to manage to get around very easily. So a bungalow was not a bad option for me.
You have other aspects as well in terms of there's quite a lot of flexibility, and daylighting was thought about. Do you want to take us through how you work with Mark?
Yes, well, Mark, I worked remotely, actually. I don't think he ever came to site until we were building. So he took on the plans and drew up the modifications that we needed. We made a couple of significant changes to the way that the house was arranged, the main one being that the entrance hall and the study were basically flipped around, swapped around in position. And that's because the entrance hall was in the wrong place. It didn't flow into the house. So that was one of the things that got shifted around. there was a lot of corner windows which I didn't like anyway. So I said, can we get rid of those? And then Mark came up with the arrangement of windows, and particularly the two sizes that we've got in the house, which are it's really fantastic, because we've got a small window which gets used in one size, and that's in the bathrooms, but also the bedrooms. But we've got 4 nice large windows which have the seats around, and they've been fantastic.
Is there a benefit of having that quite simple choice of 2 types of window?
Well, I suppose you might end up with getting a cheaper price, but I don't think it makes a huge difference probably on Passivhaus size windows, because you are buying a bespoke engineered product, really. Certainly if people are building a normal house, they tend to go for the standard sizes of windows. And perhaps there are standard sizes of windows that you can get in Passivhaus. I wouldn't know.
Well, I guess there's less to go wrong. If you know that you've got your standard openings, then I think you'd be very surprised if you'd ordered the wrong windows, whereas sometimes,
That's
my goodness.
True, yes. If they were all different sizes, it could be a nightmare. It's not a case of the windows being interchangeable, really. But one of the things that we've got, of course, here is the timber frame structure is CLT, and the opening measurements are very, very exact. So you can order with a great amount of confidence and get well-fitting windows.
How did you get down to CLT?
I really fancied having timber inside. I was the one that pushed for CLT, in fact. Mark is, I would guess, would be of the opinion that you could do it via other means. But I wanted CLT as the structure. Nevertheless, this is not really thick. It's not a very wide section of CLT in this house, but it is structurally a very good solution.
Is there anything you need to be careful of, or can any CLT product work?
You can pick any CLT product. The important thing from my point of view was being able to get the finish inside. Obviously, when CLT is used commercially, a lot of the time it's used for the structural purposes. And here I was as much as anything using it for its visual impact. But in terms of the particular CLT I used, this is quite a nice one because it's got 6 layers of timber and it's very airtight. It's edge glued as well as being glued in the normal cross-laminated way. There are some CLTs that I gather you'd be advised to put an airtight membrane around the outside, whereas you don't need to do that with this. And of course, you've only got, this house has got 17 sections of timber in it, in effect. So you've not got very many joints to complete.
So that bit comes together quite quickly, but that's not the only makeup of the wall, is it?
No, that's right. There's quite a lot. That's just the start. But it did give me a structure with a roof in 2 days. And the roof, I should say, had a cassette on it that also had some insulation straight away. So by the end of the 3rd day, we'd got an airtight wrap over the top, which doubled as weather-tight layer for a short while we got more structure in. On the walls, you've then got to build a structural frame to put some insulation. You can either use something like wood fibre attached directly, or I used I-frame structure, and then that was boxed in with wood fibre, and we filled it with a blown wood fibre. And so that then gave a very thick wall. It's something like 600 odd mil. But the result is that it's got very low U values. It's all basically down to 0.1 and less.
And being called Larch Corner, I imagine it's faced with larch.
That's right. The exterior is larch. The interior, the CLT is spruce.
You were very active on the airtightness on this project, which led to an outstanding result as well. So yes. How did you get involved in that, firstly?
Well, I was here all the time while the build was going on, and I wanted to be able to do things on the house, and that was one of the early jobs that needed doing. So Andy explained to me how to do the joints, and then I just got on with it.
And what did you learn through doing that process? Any tips for anyone else who might be their own airtightness champion?
The main thing with the tapes is that they're sort of pressure activated on the glue, as far as I understand. And that means that you do have to press them onto the surface properly. Once that's done, a day or two later, they don't come off, I'll tell you. But it means that you need to also get it into the corners. So when you're doing in particular, it's not so bad for an external corner, but when you're doing an internal corner, you need to ideally bend the tape in two and then fold it in and you push it into the corner. And that enables you to get the tape in contact right the way through the junction. And of course, you want to cover all the junctions.
So the actual CLT, have you got limited sections that you need to tape, or is there always some other connection that you've got to make?
The house itself is only about 17 sections of CLT. And so it's only the joints that you need to tape. So in that case, you've got the joints of 17 pieces of CLT. But then in addition, you've got all the joints that you're always going to have this. You've got all the joints around all the doors and windows. And that's the bit that takes time. The 17 sections of CLT took an hour.
It's like mowing the lawn or something, isn't it? A straight line is fine, but when you start having features in the middle of your lawn.
Exactly.
What is beneath us then, the foundations?
The foundation is an XPS foundation from Jacon. It comes ready cut to the exact size of the foundation that you're building. The pieces all slot together, and it has an upstand of XPS that locks into the perimeter, and that means that it then provides its own formwork for the concrete pour. And it's brilliant. It's just really good.
So we talked about the foundations. What about that roof then, being a flat roof? You obviously got it adjusted in planning to give you some extra height, but how complex was this part of the project?
That took a bit of effort. Perhaps people don't realise, but even a flat roof is not flat. Obviously, it's got to shed water. So you have a camber on it, and it's probably 4 degrees, 5 degrees, something like that. We had some problems with how the layout of the roof was put together initially, and so I went back to Mark and we looked at it again, and Mark came up with a really nice, simple design in the end for the roof. What it means is that on top of all the insulation that you've built, you've then got to build, in effect, a cold roof section that provides the finishing structure on which you then put a green roof. So the cold roof is ply, and then in my case it's just a bitumen standard type roof.
And your green roof, how did you plan that?
It was just a case of contacting one of the several suppliers that were around and getting various prices. And in the end, the whole thing was just installed in one day by a supplier.
Is it a roof that it very much just looks after itself and takes in the seasons? You just leave it to it?
Yes, I mean, that's the theory. It does pretty much. I have a look up there every now and then. And one of the things I've told myself that I must check later on this year is I'll go up and just see if I'm getting any tree seedlings getting embedded in there. Because I think that's probably the main problem that you get with a green roof. You can get seeds blowing in that then suddenly start to produce stuff that you definitely don't want up there.
That's an interesting one.
Well, think of all the railway cuttings that you've ever been through. They've all got tons of buddleia in them. It's all blown down the rail track, and you definitely don't want buddleia or trees or any large shrubs starting to get embedded in there.
You wake up one morning and think, what on earth is coming through there?
Yeah, too right.
What other challenges did you have during construction or other things to think about?
I did quite a lot of the installation. Well, I did all the installation work, actually, for the MVHR pipe work. So that was all designed for me by Alan Clark. And we had the full design with all the MVHR kit supplied as a single delivery. And then it's down to me to install. And it's quite a slow job for somebody who's not done it before. It took me ages. But fundamentally, I've got nice big gaps voids that give the headroom to get the pipework in. And it was very carefully designed so that you could go through the cupboards as well to keep out of the way. So in the end, it wasn't too difficult to do. And most of it would be accessible if you needed to get to it.
Any other jobs that you have done during construction?
Yes, laid quite a bit of the flooring here. Andy came up with the brilliant idea of laying the whole thing as, in effect, one single piece with no room divider strips like you sometimes get at the doors. So the whole thing's laid in one piece as a massive floating floor over about, I suppose it must be 140 square metres, something like that. He spent quite a long time puzzling over the geometry of the house to make sure that he could centre up the boards so that you don't end up with slivers along the side of the walls and things like that. But then after that, once we got going, I could actually lay quite large amounts of it without him having to do it. But I have to say, he's the magician that knows the junctions and how to get underneath doors and round corners, and I left that to him.
And you've also had fun in the design of the house, I know. Perhaps I would have wanted when I was younger, but you've hidden in here as your secret office.
Yes, yeah. Well, I asked Mark, can I have a big door for the office? And it's crazy, really. It's a big piece of CLT, 3-ply CLT, 2 metres by 2 metres. So it's on a big sliding, like you would probably get for a shed. And it's got paintings affixed to the door, so you don't really even notice that it's a door, and then you push it aside and people go, "Oh, that's interesting."
I came across this website the other day that actually specialises in making secret passages and things like that. And there's a side of me that could have been drawn down that.
Yes, it's interesting that I talked with Andy for quite a long while about possibly doing a secret door for the kids' bedroom, because I thought they'll love this. And then we scrapped the idea when we realised that probably there was going to be, I don't know, 1.5 to 200 kilos of timber in because you need a really big door structure to make it work. And we just thought, oh, maybe not. I don't fancy a 4-year-old getting his fingers stuck in the door.
Yeah,
so I scrapped that idea.
Common sense as well, isn't there?
Yeah.
We'll leave it on TV, all the secret passages.
Yeah.
Well, I mean, it's been a really successful project. You've picked up a UK Passivhaus award as well. Is there anything that you've learnt through this or would do differently on another project if you were to do one?
Yes, and I suppose, I don't know whether this is an awful thing to admit, but I might not use the CLT next time. So one of the things I now know is that if I thought about this quite carefully, I could use large sections of 3-ply timber as an internal wall and still get the timber look. And then I'd be doing more like using a timber frame really instead, and that would work quite well.
So that is a really interesting thing to say. So you're, I think, alluding to being more efficient with materials, which is in some ways ironic because I think you won this award because you were so carefully thinking about embodied energy.
Well, yes, we did think about it quite carefully, but the territory the fact that everything above ground is timber and so on, it just lends itself to ending up being a lot lower carbon than if you got a standard brick and block build, for instance. It's just always going to be massively better.
So that was a big learning. I'm going to keep going. Anything else?
Yeah, I would probably make a 2-story next time on the ground of the form factor would be better. This is one of the things that's tricky. I would still want to have a downstairs bedroom because I think generally the housing supply in the country is pretty deficient in terms of looking after people who get elderly or they actually are disabled, but just mobility problems. And I was looking just today at some houses, as I do, some plans, and thinking about this and realising that there was, on a new estate, there was not a single house that would be accessible for somebody in a wheelchair.
This is a really interesting point because I'm certainly thinking of helping my parents build another house potentially in the future, and the logical thing would be bungalow. But, is it necessary? I'm intrigued by that. Is it just the efficiency side that's making you think two-storey?
Yes. If the form factor improves, you can use a lot less insulation, so you can reduce that amount. And there's less structure in a two-storey overall. I'm actually talking with Mark at the moment about how to do some buildings. And again, I'm looking at the idea that we'd have a bedroom downstairs but still have a two-storey arrangement. So 3 or 4 bedrooms in total, but always ensure that you can put a single bedroom downstairs. Because it just simply doesn't work in most houses. You just can't do it.
Flexibility, I think, is another key point. You talk about the bedroom downstairs, and that's certainly, we made sure that we had 1 bedroom downstairs, but I think we had the luxury of a slightly bigger house. But the idea of a bungalow, you think it still makes sense? If you forgot everything else, it is a logical thing as you get older, or not necessarily?
Yeah, bungalow's great. I mean, it is a wonderful house, but I suppose if you go back to the 70s, there would have been a lot of so-called chalet bungalows built. And really, that's the sort of thing I'm thinking of, where there's downstairs and upstairs bedroom space. So that it's reasonably space efficient. You've got a lot less foundation to put in, which is one of the considerations. And, of course, there's a lot less roof as well. So it's reasonably efficient build that you can get. But the thing is that you don't have to have all the bedrooms downstairs.
Was that a constraint of this site, really? You wouldn't have got a 2-storey building here?
Not at all, no. It had already got passed as a single storey, and the neighbour next door was worried about just having a single storey. In fact, she was concerned about the raising of the roof, but I managed to put her mind at rest.
How long have you been living here now?
Just over 2 years now, and the garden's reasonably mature now. It's looking a lot better. Some of the hedging is still thinking about it rather than growing, because we've had some strange weather this last year or two. But it's generally things are coming along quite well. And the garden last year was the focus, to try and get it looking reasonably tidy and actually have some planted areas so that it's not just a piece of green grass.
How much land have you got here?
It's 0.4 of an acre in total, so it's quite a big garden, really.
Very similar to me, and I similarly find myself spending a lot of time outside, and you've just got to try not to get frustrated, I think. Just go with the flow.
You have to just cope with the fact that there are weeds in the garden.
Yeah. Finally, is there anything else that you think would be helpful sharing with a fellow self-builder looking to embark on a journey?
I would say one of the best things about the bungalow that I've got here is that it's got a nice big storage wall, and storage is quite an important thing, particularly if you've lost the loft, then you're going to need storage. But actually these days I would personally say you should always build into the loft, because that space that you're constructing, and then you can use it for something. So it still comes back to making sure you've got storage space. And one of the worst problems, again, with the typical spec build house is there's no storage at all. Nothing. As it happens, I've got quite a nice big double garage size shed as well, which is rather good.
The one trouble with storage is you do fill it up. So you have to say, this is enough storage.
True. At the moment, the shed has got quite a lot of offcuts of CLT and 3-ply materials and boards that I used in construction. They're all still there, waiting to find a home.
Well, it's difficult, isn't it? Because I know that we've got a number of paint tins and posts and this and that. But yeah, when do you say, actually, it needs to go to someone else, or try actively to find a home? True,
the paint tins just end up being solid paint tins. They're no good at all after a few years. So if you're not going to use it, get rid of it.
Well, it's been lovely to hear the full story behind Larch Corner. Congratulations again on the recent award. And thanks, Mick.
Thank you very much. Nice to chat again.
If you want to go into more detail, then there's an opportunity with the project architect himself today. Head to passivhausesecrets.co.uk. That's passivhausesecrets.co.uk to find out more about Larch Corner and some of Mark's other high performance buildings. Before you reach for the stop button, couple of bits of business, if that's okay. Firstly, if you like this podcast and you want to help us out, then what would really be good is to write us a short review in whatever app you're in to listen to us. It could be Apple, it could be Stitcher, it could be Spotify, it could be something that I've never even heard of. But if they allow you to write a review and to say something positive about us, then that would be much appreciated, because often it can boost us up the rankings and get us in front of other people. And we're always trying to help as many people as we can. So that would be much appreciated. And also our membership community, The Hub. You might wonder, what does Ben do after the podcast? It gets to the end. Where does he go? Well, often I'm either trying to help our Hub members or thinking about how I might help them in the future and things that we could do within our community. So it's a digital archive really that you can dig into, with live trainings, courses, in-depth video case studies, a forum, so that you know you're in the right place, because everyone else is trying to build a high-performance home and really keeping an eye on the embodied carbon, just trying to do the best job they can. And that's why everyone always produces better homes than 99% of the houses that get built here, because the volume developers don't think quite so much about it. Or if they do, they think about their pockets, and that really doesn't end up in the same results. So yeah, if you want to join the Hub, we'd like to help you further. houseplanninghelp.com/join is the place to go. houseplanninghelp.com/join. Next time, Nigel Dutt is my guest, and we're going to be looking at a house that grew from a walled garden. I don't think it was a seed that was planted, but we'll find out what happened. Thank you so much for listening. The House Planning Help podcast is produced by Regen Media, content that matters.